All right, we are good to go. Hey everybody, it's Dave Isaacs with you for jamplay.com. This is week 5 of creating melodies from scales. And so we've been talking about several different scale sounds. We've been talking about the way in which you process in your head the information, okay? So the idea of organizing your ideas, organizing your ideas through phrasing, thinking rhythmically, things like call and response, things like note groupings, playing just a few notes, and then looking at even a busy solo with lots of notes as being a long set of shorter ideas that are strung together one after another. Excuse me. It's a good way to think. I mean, ultimately, you want to think about improvising the same way you think about speaking. Some people are good at speaking off the top of their heads extemporaneously. Some people are not so good. Some people have to have their words planned out beforehand. Other people are good with the flow. I've certainly had to learn how to do both of those things. Obviously, I'm trying not to get tongue-tied sitting up here with you guys watching me. But, you know, the analogy is really very, very strong. The more articulate you can be musically, the stronger your musical ideas are. And so we're thinking about, even as we add new sound, as we talk about different scales and learning to recognize the sound of each one, we are still always thinking about phrasing, always thinking about organizing ideas, the way in which ideas are put together. That's very important. So just to sort of recap, we've done a bunch of things here. We talked about the C major scale, right? Because C is a great place to begin. Let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start as the song goes. Do, re, mi, right? So C major scale. And as you know, we can play this in a variety of locations. And we've talked about how that scale can be changed by simply omitting notes. So I can play a major pentatonic scale by taking the first, second, third, fifth, sixth, and eighth of that sequence. And how immediately that gives us a different flavor than the major. Compared to straight major. Now, obviously you can do more with a 7-note scale than a 5-note scale. Kind of stands to reason. But with any scale, we are still, or at least this is one way to go about it, and personally I think it's the best way to go about it, because that major scale is so familiar, because that do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do is something that is probably in your head, whether you even knew where it came from or what it was or not. When you learn what the sound of those 7 tones is, you can then learn to alter them. So we talked about, for example, major pentatonic turning into minor pentatonic by replacing major third with minor third. I think I need to adjust something here. Let me just double check that. I don't think that should be like that. Okay, that's cool. Now, major third, minor third. Just replacing one note with another and it changes the flavor. I don't even have to go further than that. I can just stay within this, let's say, in major pentatonic. Why does that work as a musical idea? Because number one, there was a clearly organized phrase, a rhythmic pattern, ba 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 da, ba ba da da, ba 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 da, ba 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 da, right? So one following the other. Just a technical note to the Jam Play guys. I am making an adjustment here, and you tell me if something bad happened. But I think I had 2 open mics and we don't need that. So this should be better. Okay. So. See? Do, re, mi. The first 3 notes of the major scale. But what did I do? I omitted the fourth so that we're getting more of the sound of major pentatonic. I used a repeating ba 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 da 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 ding da da. It's repetitive. Ba 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 da first half, ba 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 da second half. But the variation is starting on the downbeat. Sorry, on the two. No, wait. Sorry, on the end of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and let's look at that. 1 and 2 we and up. So rising, and then so it's the first slide to the third. See that flavor from the slide. Ba 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 da, and then right down ba dee da. So just up, down, but 2, 1, and bum wa dee da wa. Follow the up and down. Up again, down, down. Couple of other little things. Notice the variation. 1 and 2 and that's a 16th. And 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 2 and a 4 da ba da. Changing the syncopation from 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and up. Right? So repetition and variation and a lot of flavor between the whole step slides and then this half step pull off. So you see, it doesn't take much to make it sound musical. Anyhow, that's major pentatonic, and now if I didn't like that as much, but I keep wanting to put in that D note, and the idea was to illustrate minor pentatonic so that I was just replacing major third with minor third. But just because of the nature of the two scales, major pentatonic, do, re, mi, so 1, 2, 3 of the scale. Minor pentatonic, 3, 4, 5. So in other words, 1, 2, 3, 1, flat, 3, 4, 5. Not only have we made that half step adjustment from E natural to E flat, from a major third to a minor third, but we've also shifted ba ba bum, the first 3 tones of the scale. Instead of simply covering 1, 2, 3, go 1, 3, 4, 5. So it changes not just major to minor, but where we are within the octave. So to translate this lick to minor has to do this if we're using the pentatonic strictly, which I don't love, but that's okay. What's the difference between one and the other? Sometimes it's hard to quantify. I mean, we could say, well, you landed on the root on the and of 3 instead of on the and. You know, I can articulate that. And in thoughtful composing, making up music, it's worth looking at that kind of detail. And sometimes you're thinking that way on the fly when you're improvising. But often it's just it worked or it didn't. But I will say, that just sounds less satisfying to me than... Now some of it was that the shape changed. Instead of ba boo ba da ba 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 bum, that's just a little too square. Now if I were in E flat major, sorry, I started running off on a tangent there. But when I played That felt like E flat major to me. Even though in any case, simply shifting, hopefully this whole conversation is illustrated, that sometimes simply shifting major to minor is not enough to actually do what you need the music to do. And so, because we're in a different part of the scale, you're going to end up making different note choices. But anyhow, you see how simple that was. We talked last time about how we can, combine notes of the major and the minor pentatonic. And we can add in notes from the major scale. I mean, possibly one of the biggest things you should be clear about is that you are not obliged to pull notes from one scale all the time. I mean, if I want to just do, so I'm going to play this A vamp and I'm just going to play pentatonic licks over it, right? This is all familiar stuff. Let's see, is this going to be, please cooperate for me. Sorry about that. But just changing that vibe, right? The major and the minor. So, anyhow, I can play those licks just straight minor pentatonic. It works just fine. Like I said, major third may be a little funny over a minor track, but you know what? It's all workable. Now, I was talking last time about the difference between, say, not just the 3-2-1, the major and the minor third, but also between major and minor pentatonic, emphasizing a sixth. Now let me go to A now, because we were an A minor pentatonic. Likely that's familiar, and if you need to review it, go back and check out last week's stuff, because it's in there too. But we talked about how the major pentatonic emphasizes the relationship between 5, 6, and 8. I was born by a river in a little town. Little Sam Cooke, right? And how many melodies you've heard. They go 5, 6, 1. Little Stevie Wonder. Or Pure Prairie League. Right, that's straight major pentatonic as well. So that 5, 6, 1, very familiar sound. I could do it and go 1, 6, 5, and then we get. By the way, phrasing, right? 3 notes. But instead of going, which is not at all interesting, it's. Leave a space. Go back the other direction. 3-note figure becomes a signature line that you recognize whenever you hear it. I'm just thinking about ups and downs and playing with 5, 6, 1. Does a lot. And of course, we talked about if you substitute flat 7 for 6, we get a whole different feeling, and this is working off the minor pentatonic. Now, somehow not as satisfying as. But if we. see, just changing to that minor tonality does change your note choices. Doesn't mean we can't have things like this. Where I use both the F sharp and the G, the major 6 and the minor 7, and that's taking us to another mode we'll have to deal with. But it's taking us right to the mode we have to deal with, but it also takes us to another. We'll deal with that. But today we're talking about the Dorian. And I need to qualify this, okay? Yeah, Isaacs, you always do so much talking. You got to qualify everything. Well, you know what? The perspective matters. Because I can promise you, all the people that I work with who are working on learning how to improvise, how to solo, and most of them, probably like many of you, if not most of you, learn the scales. You can play up and down the neck. Some of you can play the same scale in any position. Some of you could probably sweep them with 3 notes per string, but you still can't play a solo. Because all this underlying contextual stuff is the thing that's missing. And I've talked before about how the underlying contextual stuff is what naturally gifted people just get. And if that's the thing you need, if that's the thing you need to look for, then when I'm talking, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, just to be clear on that. Because I see the comments, I'm watching you. This means you, I know who you are. The Dorian mode, you may already know, is the second mode of the major scale. You're probably familiar with the concept, or you may be familiar with the concept, that you create a mode by taking a major scale and while using the same exact set of letters, the same exact set of notes, we just begin and end in a different place. So instead of playing C major like this, from C to C, I might use the same fingering, but go from D to D, right? And there's Dorian mode. Now that's fine. Mathematically, that is exactly how we get the modes. That's how the modes are created. But in your understanding as an improviser, that is not the way that's going to help you. I don't believe. I mean, maybe it helps you find it, but to me, there's theoretical and mathematical hoops you have to jump through that I think are unnecessary to work that way. If you have some foundational information, and what that information is that if you think of a Dorian as simply an alteration of a scale you already know, never mind the larger context of how modes work. Because, look, to be perfectly honest, the way in which most of you learned modes has zero relationship to the way you're going to apply them. And that's the problem. When you apply them with any scale, it doesn't matter whether you're calling it a scale or a mode or a lick or a gesture or whatever the heck it is, what matters, what allows you to be able to use this is the tonality. And the tonality means the flavor of the notes you're choosing, but it also is dependent on a root, on a musical home, on a key, or at least the concept of a key center. And this is where everybody gets all hung up on the math. And I love when people start in the comments saying, well, you know, it really is supposed to be this. And yes, I know, of course it is. Don't make me pull rank on you, okay, dude? But, like, you think of it in the way that works, first of all. But if I am thinking in terms of the difference between A minor pentatonic and A Dorian, check this out. Here's A minor pentatonic. The 1, the minor 3, the 4, the 5, the minor 7, the root. You know what? Let's go ahead and open my tab so that I am looking at the same thing that you are. That would be helpful, I think. So let's do it this way. I'm now looking at the tab sheet. Here is a natural minor. Oh, that's right, from pentatonic to. So let's remember the difference between minor pentatonic and natural minor. Here's minor pentatonic in the open position. O, flat 3, 4, 5. So clearly we skipped the 2. Well, the complete natural minor, we need to add the 2. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5. And then natural minor's going, then pentatonic's going to skip to the minor 7. So we're filling in the 2. Catch that space between 1 and 3. And then we're filling in the 6 to catch that place between 1 and flat 7. So if pentatonic has a couple of holes in it, 1 to 3 filled in by 2, 5 to 7 filled in by 6. Here's where things are going to get interesting in playing with your modes, and I'm going to come back and refer to this again. If you look at those 2 notes, the notes that connected the minor pentatonic to the natural minor, again, just filling in the spaces, and it's very convenient to use key of A, because then we're just, with our natural minor scale, using only letters, natural letters, no sharps, no flats. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. So let's be clear about a couple of things. We have a minor tonality because we've still got the same minor third that was in the minor pentatonic. Adding in the 2 doesn't change that at all. And it makes sense, right? Minor pentatonic or natural minor should have a minor sound. Fair enough. We've also established last week that one of the signature sounds of natural minor is the flat 6. And that you frequently hear, or often hear, songs in a natural minor key. The flat 6 comes in following the flat 7 as a part of a descending line. And that flat 6, you can probably already tell, wants to go here. Boom, boom, boo, 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 boo. And many of you are thinking of very possibly. And that's exactly what that chord progression is using as a natural minor. The root, down a whole step to the minor 7, another whole step to the minor 6 or flat 6, and then the 5. It's also in the morning where the sun didn't shine. And I forgot all the words. I load 16 tons and number 9 coal. And the straw boss said, "Where the blessing my soul." Anyway, you load 16 tons, what do you get? More natural minor. Dorian just replaces that flat 6 with a major 6. So we have a combination of minor sounds and major sounds. We have the bottom half of the scale, what might in theory class be called the lower tetrachord, identical to the natural minor. In other words, the note that is key here in defining the sound, the tonality of this scale, is that minor third, no matter where we are. Right? Minor third. So the Dorian feels like a kind of minor, which it sort of is. It's just you never learn it as the Dorian minor. That's not the right way to refer to it. You don't even hear about it as the Dorian scale frequently. You hear about it as the Dorian mode. Well, is it the same thing? Yes, it is. Mode is telling you how we derived the notes, how we arrived at them. But you have to be thinking in terms of the tonal center. If you're trying to think in terms of C major and you go, okay, well, so D Dorian, and people will say, oh, well, use the D Dorian over C major. It's, well, then you're just playing C major. It's no different. You just happen to be emphasizing the 2 a lot. So you're doing a lot of D over a chord in C. It's still going to sound like... It's kind of cool. But at some point, you're going to want it to resolve. I I guarantee your ear is not picking up on any kind of Dorian flavor. Your ear is picking up on C major, and we're emphasizing a dissonant 2. That's it. Remember, when I throw these numbers around, the numbers refer to the position in the sequence. It's important that you're clear on that and you start recognizing what that sounds like. But that second half of the Dorian is using a major note, the major 6. So if I walk through now A natural minor, 1, 2, this is from the tab, by the way, in the first line, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, minor 3rd, minor 6th. Now, I'm just going to raise that 6, and it's a little tricky. You got to watch out for the terminology. If I say minor 6 or flat 6, I'm using those terms interchangeably right now to refer to the note that's a half step above the 5. But we could say we have flatted the 6, using flat as a verb. In other words, note 6 is lowered, and that gives you flat 6. Or I could just call it the flat 6, and it would mean, again, the note a half step above 5. Excuse me. So if I say we are raising the minor 6 to major, in this case, we do have a minor interval going to a major interval. But remember, if we were working from the major scale, which is ultimately your reference for everything, then we want to just use the 6th of the major scale. So technically, by this way of thinking, the Dorian mode is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, octave. And when I do that, I am using the numbers that relate us back to the major scale, with the only difference between this and the natural minor being 6 or flat 6. The tab is going to give you a handful of fingerings here. So again, just to contrast, and hopefully you're not just thinking numbers, but you're also getting the visual on the fingerboard itself of half step to a whole step, and whole step to a half step in a different place. So here's A natural minor, second octave, and you should hopefully be recognizing the sound of that minor 6, especially when you hear it that way. We'll get to that. That's harmonic minor. That is relevant to this discussion, but I'm not there yet. Okay, here's Dorian, open position. That note does kind of jump out to your ear, doesn't it? Second line is just giving you a couple more fingerings. Natural minor, Dorian. Listen for dee da da. Now, one of the things you want to keep in mind here is that once you've done that, we really do change the flavor of what we're doing just by altering that one note. So I'm going to use some of these licks in a moment that are there in the tab as examples, but I'm going to start off by just sort of running up and down the scale over my A minor vamp. And I want you to notice as I go back and forth between using flat 6, minor 6, the note from the natural minor, and the major 6, the note from Dorian, and you will hear the flavor completely change. That's a totally different sound. I mean, scale alone. Dorian. Okay, so it should be pretty clear that even though that is a very, very small change, it is literally one note, a half step becoming a whole step, F becomes F sharp. The whole vibe is different. And to my ear, and this is one reason why the Dorian mode is so common, because really, not all the modes are equally used. The most common modes you hear in contemporary music are the Dorian and the Mixolydian. Yes, you hear others in other kinds of settings. There are people that write music specifically to use, hey, I'm writing something in Lydian. But in terms of the average person, the music the average person is hearing, there is absolutely Dorian and Mixolydian in there, and it has to do with the chords. And this is something that you should be clear on. But before we get into that, let me now look at these licks, and I'm just going to talk more specifically about the way that I'm using signature sounds to really define Dorian. For example, the lick in the fourth line, marked measure 13, that goes like this. Or having the half step between the 6 and the flat 7. Distinctive. That descent from the minor 7 to the major 6. Same idea over here. It's that half step between the minor 6, the minor 7 and the major 6. Look at how jazzy that sounds. And to my ear, now depending on, what you listen to, what your musical reference is, you might hear different things. But when I listen to this lick, I hear an Allman Brothers kind of thing. So for example, something like this. That you might recognize. Now that's just pentatonic, but those weren't the notes, Allman Brothers tune. But could I use straight pentatonic? Sure. Alright, so I could go on with that. But pentatonic skips the 6. And it adds a lot. Clearly that's a little bit of a rip-off of In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, but it's a great example of what I'm talking about here. Guys, just to throw out there, I don't know if any questions have come in, or if I've lost everybody with all the theory. And if there's anything I should reiterate, please let me know. But the main thing here is just recognizing, learning to hear the difference between a major and a minor third, a major and a minor six. Totally different sound. And say a major six and a minor seven. Six, minor six. And it really might be worthwhile to sit down and sort of map these formulas, 1 through 7, or 1 through 8. Major pentatonic, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Minor pentatonic, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. Natural minor, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. Dorian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. We've just manipulated where is the 6 or the 7 to switch between these scales. So in other words, you can think of this as being simple alterations that you might make on the fly to use one flavor or another. Nothing wrong with playing a pentatonic lick followed by a Dorian lick. And aren't you really using the same basic sound? You're just either using the sixth, or not. And if you're going from Dorian to natural minor, then you're just choosing a major six or a minor six. Now, that might work depending on what you're playing over, and it might not. I made a brief reference to the way that the harmonic minor has something in common with the Dorian. You don't learn harmonic minor as a mode, because it's not. That's not how it's created. The harmonic minor is what happens when you borrow a major seventh and replace the flat seven of a natural minor. And a lot of people think of that as being, well, harmonic minor, that's your Yngwie Malmsteen, Ritchie Blackmore, exotic. And if we're just going over an A vamp, that is how you use it. And so we continue to have this sort of exotic, whether you think of it as a Spanish or an Arabic or Arabian, whatever it is, flavor. But you find the harmonic minor scale in classical music all the time, and very little classical music that sounds anything like that. So what gives? And why the heck is it called harmonic minor? Well, that's because the whole reason for that G sharp, that major 7, is so that we can use a major 5 chord. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole necessarily in a deep way. I just want you to be clear that the whole reason harmonic minor exists is so when there is a tweak, an alteration in the underlying chord, you can match it. And so we have access to a note we wouldn't ordinarily have in a minor key, which is the leading tone. Very important note to use because it's our strong resolution back to 1. So we can keep the minor 6 tonality, but still have that strong resolution. So in other words, you use harmonic minor when you've got a major 5 chord, like A minor and E. Well, Dorian does the same thing, because we've taken the natural minor scale and we have substituted a major 6 for a minor 6. Well, remember, your chords in a given key come from the scale too. Okay? So for example, that harmonic minor, the 5 chord in an A minor scale is going to actually be, if we use the scale tones, E, G, B, which from the A natural minor is a 5, a flat 7, and a 2. And a 4 would be a 4, a flat 6, and an 8. So what we're going to do is take the major 6, And look at what happens here. 4, 6, 8. Bum, ba, dum. That's a major triad because when we use the F sharp as part of that Dorian, F sharp plus D implies a D major chord. F natural, the flat 6, plus D implies D minor. So ordinarily, a song in the key of A minor is probably going to have a minor 4 chord, a D minor. Fairly straightforward. I see we're coming up on the hour, but since we got to start late, I'm going to go on till a quarter after, if that's cool with everybody. Y'all let me know if there's anything else I need to keep in mind. So, okay, good. So the Dorian mode works just fine over a straight A minor, but it also works beautifully over anything that uses A minor and D. So this is one of the reasons you hear it so frequently in, say, Santana. Anyway, the chords, or so yes, there's more going on there, and this is not a discussion about Latin music, but there are plenty of songs that have a chord progression that's A minor and D. And we would say that it's a modal chord progression because we're using the notes of D Dorian. A minor and D minor are in the key of A minor. But if you go to a D major, or if you hit that F sharp, which is meaning the same thing, have you actually left A minor? No, I don't believe you have. You're using a Dorian note. You are borrowing a particular note for flavor. But do we really have to be so specific and say, hey, you know, this is not really A minor, it's A Dorian? Yeah, we can. I mean, understand, I'm a big believer in knowing the terminology, knowing what the standards are, because in any field it really helps if you can communicate clearly with people that do your job. It's the reason the military have very specific terminology for things, so there is absolutely no misunderstanding of what's meant. And musicians tend to be a little bit looser than that, but you know, it definitely helps if your band speaks your language. And if you've ever been in a band and worked as somebody's sideman, sometimes you have to learn what they mean by stuff. I certainly know when I first came to Nashville and I had a bunch of terms that, I mean, I understood how the theory worked for the Nashville number system, but if someone said, give me a diamond on the one, I had to learn what that meant. So, point being, all the theory terminology is important because it helps you categorize things and hopefully categorize things in the same way that other people who know this stuff do so that you can communicate easily. But at the same time, it would be sort of ridiculous to say, well, we're not in the key of A minor anymore because there's no F sharp in A minor. We're just using a scale that has a minor tonality since it includes that minor third. So, in other words, to back up for a second, you can choose to use that Dorian scale to incorporate that major 6 when you're playing over a simple A minor chord, or a simple, you know, whatever minor chord it is, as long as you match the root. So you'd play over A minor with A Dorian, you'd play over C minor with C Dorian, so forth. And never mind that you might have learned it as D Dorian. We're using that sound in a variety of keys. We're just transposing the set of relationships. That's really the only way you need to think about it. Now, with that said, you also can use that scale in a chord progression where you might have a minor 1 and a major 4. So, something like his evil ways. Because the D chord includes that F natural, the major 6. Just in the same way that harmonic minor lets you use the major 5. And interestingly enough, there is a scale. It's not in your tab. I didn't really get into it, but the melodic form of the minor, melodic minor, uses major 6 and major 7 on the way up, and neither on the way down. Minors on the way down. So what should that tell you? We have all of these terms from minors. We have a natural minor. We have a minor pentatonic. We have a Dorian, which is technically not a minor, except it technically is. We have harmonic minor. We have melodic minor. What does all of this mean? What does all of this mean? It just means that the minor tonality comes from having the 1, the flat 3. Whether or not I have a 2 or a 4 in the first part of that scale does not change that. Still keeps the minor tonality. But in the second half of that minor scale, very distinctive sound with those notes, minor 6, minor 7. But that either the 6 or the 7 can be shifted over to a major 6 or a major 7 as determined by the chords. If I try to do it all over an A minor vamp, it could be a little funny, but I can go lick by lick. Let's see what happens if I do that. Gonna play back for me, right? Maybe. Okay. Natural minor. Dorian. Harmonic minor. Oops. Natural, no, melodic minor. So I can switch them back and forth, that works. And that is really a key point here, okay? Sorry, funny how I can look at my icons and forget what they do. It really is key, if I'm gonna back up and give you your main takeaways here. And either no one's got any questions or you're all lost. Main takeaways. Every scale can be defined sonically, aurally, A-U-R-A-L-L-Y, by the sound of certain key tones, certain key notes that define in your ear the sound of that scale. So all our minors, every form of minor, includes a minor third. That is signature, that is defining of minor. A natural minor is defined by that minor third plus that half step, but to differentiate it from harmonic or melodic minor, sorry, wrong example. And I can define harmonic minor with the major 7th against the minor 6th. And all I have to do, in fact, is to focus on those two notes, and you know exactly where we are. Or So if I wanted to find Dorian, so when you have a chord progression and you're trying to figure out what notes to play, yes, the primary scale is going to come from your chords, and sometimes one scale is going to fit everything. Sometimes your only option is to use one scale. Sometimes, more often, you have lots of options depending on which notes you decide to focus on. And this is another reason why, as you're learning your scales, if you've got those big positions, let's say you've been practicing your 3-note per string and you can go up and down the neck in all these different keys, you have got to step away from that and use some of these smaller musical ideas, getting back to the idea of gestures. And just to give you an example of that, if you look at the last musical example on the tab at the top of the second page, what's marked as measure 22, very definitive gesture and melody from Oye Como Va. And then that's from Classical Gas. A minor and D7. There's lots of songs that do that. Say something funky like this. A minor 7 and D7. Should have made a track of this. Yeah, could have put that down on there too, but you know, we could have 1,000 examples. The tabs are just giving you a basic illustration. It's important that you see it that way. But I hope you've got that main takeaway. As you learn these different scales, you have got to connect them together, because the way you're going to learn how to use them is recognizing how particular chord tones are going to match up with particular chords. If the 1, 4, and 5 are all minor, use the natural minor. If the 4 is major, use the Dorian. Harmonic minor is not going to work over a major 4, because then you would have the major 6 in the chord and the minor 6 in the scale. So if the 4 is major, use Dorian. Rather, if 4 is major and 5 is minor. If 4 is minor and 5 is major, use harmonic minor. If 4 and 5 are both major, use melodic minor. It's a lot of math, okay? But after a while, you just will know the sound, because truthfully, it's pretty darn distinctive, and understanding the scales helps you understand the chords, because when you start putting chords together, they become melodic. You know, we're so, as guitar players, everything with chords is box. Here's the A box, here's the C box, here's the F box. Here is the box position for an A minor pentatonic scale. Get out of the box. Enough with the boxes. It's time for some unboxing. New box or no box. Anti-box. The visual aspect of box, is useful. But seeing a set of possibilities within an area, the cloud of probability, to get into to borrow a term from physics, there are options. You can choose them all. So you can think of a scale as being a more fluid thing than this monolithic, you must use these 8 notes, and if you played a note that wasn't one of these 7 or 8, you are wrong. It might not sound good if you didn't use it right. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play over I'm going to play over the minor vamp, and I'm going to mix just all kinds of stuff in here, and I want to see if you can recognize when things are going by. So there are no chords in this other than basically A minor. All right? I didn't really use a 4 or a 5 here, and that's to leave myself the flexibility. Now, it is minor, so you'll notice when I plug in, say, a major third, sometimes it actually sounds okay. But I'm just going to mix it up, and I want to see what you can identify as you hear it. Who says I can't use them both? Or major third's a little funky, but it doesn't sound bad. It's not classy like that. But that's kind of neat too. I mean, remember, you can just use patterns and play nonsense notes, but Dorian, natural minor. So I was able to switch back and forth between them easily, because it's not like I have to go, ooh, natural minor, box. Dorian, box. No. One note. Major 6, minor 6. Major 7, minor 7. That is the great big takeaway. I hope this is all making sense, and I will be checking my jam play messages in case anyone's got specific questions, or just come and join me on one of my Q&As. I have Q&As on Thursday and Saturday. So either way, you can get a hold of me, and other questions can be answered if you have them. I really hope this is helpful. I know this is powerful information. You've just got to be able to put the ideas together. I know I can be verbose about these things, but truthfully, like I said, if God gave you a gift, I celebrate you, my hat is off to you, and if he didn't, then what I am telling you is the words matter, because this is going to tell you how to understand how that gifted person is able to do what they're able to do, as easy as falling off a log. All right, guys. Thank you for sticking it out with me. I'll be back next week. Again, I am Dave Isaacs. I appreciate you watching. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Jason, and everybody at Jam Play for making all this stuff work so smoothly. You guys rock, and I'll see you next time.